Have you ever really thought about how we produce speech sounds? I know it just comes automatically to most of us, but there's so much going on with our lips and tongue and teeth and jaw and throat and breath. So, how do babies and toddlers learn to imitate these sounds? And what can you do to help them? I'm Tara Tuck, and I help parents, preschool teachers, and all of you who care for young children to learn everything you need to know about speech and language, the most important part of child development. In this video, I'm going to tell you about learning to actually speak. Speech sounds have to be heard and practiced by little children in order for them to be easily understood. So I'm going to tell you how your little one is learning and practicing all those sounds she needs to make in order to speak your language. I'm a speech and language pathologist and the author of The Joy of Language, The Guide to Language and Learning for Parents and Caregivers. I've given you that link below. So please subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos and visit my website. As I explained in my last video, all the sounds that babies make are preparing them for making actual speech sounds. It takes a lot of practice. So exactly how are speech sounds produced? Well, speech sounds are produced by a combination of what we call place, manner, and voicing. Place is the place in the mouth where the sound is produced. Our articulators that we use for articulation are our tongue, teeth, lips, and bottom jaw. When we change the positions of each, we can produce different sounds, which are called phonemes. The manner in which a phoneme is produced describes how the breath flows through the mouth and what kind of sound it makes. Like some are popping sounds like p, b, and some are made by the friction of airflow like f and s. And some are nasal sounds, the sound coming through your nose like and n. And then there are vowels that are mostly made by just moving your tongue and lips like e, ah, ooh. And the third way to produce phonemes is called voicing. Sounds are either voiced or voiceless. Either you use your voice, having your vocal cords vibrate and make sounds like ah, b, d, o, z, or you don't use your voice at all, like p, k, t, f. Those are sort of whispery sounds. If you put your hands on your throat while producing different speech sounds, you'll be able to feel the vibration with voice sounds, but not with voiceless sounds. Try some of that. Put your hand here and feel it. In my book, The Joy of Language, I describe each sound, usually symbolized by a letter of the alphabet, though not always, and exactly how each sound is produced. So check it out there. Of course, I describe English sounds, but all languages have phonemes that are produced by place, manner, and voicing. And your baby will be learning the sounds of the language that he hears, or the languages that he hears, right from birth. Now, how long does it take a child to learn all the sounds of his or her language and use them in words? When should you be able to understand what your child is saying? Well, you should be able to understand your 2-year-old about 50% of the time. So a 2-year-old should have about 50% intelligibility. A 3-year-old should have about 75% intelligibility, and a 4-year-old about 100% intelligibility. That means that a 4-year-old whose words can only be understood 50% of the time might have an articulation delay. Now, intelligible doesn't mean that every sound is produced perfectly. It means that every word can be understood. Of course, many articulation difficulties are normal during a child's language development. A 2-year-old commonly leaves off some final consonants, like you might say ki for kiss, or internal syllables like saying elephant for elephant. He also usually omits one consonant in a blend, like saying top for stop, boo for blue, or coo for school. But it gets better and better as the child approaches school age. And by the time a child enters kindergarten, his speech should be really pretty easy to understand, although he may still have a few common errors. Of course, there are specific words that are more difficult to pronounce, even for adults, but that's different from always substituting a th for a s, as in thun for sun, or a w for an as in wed for red. Most 5-year-olds, though, make no continual speech sound errors at all. On my website, I have a chart that shows at what age each speech sound should be acquired. So you'll probably be interested in that. And it's under downloads, so you can even print out a copy to hold on to for reference as your child is developing speech. You'll find that really pretty interesting. But if your child is making some errors with speech sounds, if he's having some difficulty with articulation, what are the most common sounds he might find to be difficult? What kinds of errors is he likely to make? Well, the first kind of errors are sound substitutions. These are sounds that are used instead of sounds that are a little harder to produce, and they're produced in a different place in the mouth. Like for s, so he might say thun instead of sun, or crazy instead of crazy, or wabbit instead of rabbit, or yunch instead of lunch, or tat instead of cat. So these are some speech sounds that are being substituted for others. Then there are what we call phonemic distortions, which are not actually sounds from your language, but it's a distortion of the sound, like what we call a lateral lisp with the S sound. The air escapes over the sides of the tongue rather than through the front of the mouth. So a child might say sun instead of sun. That's not in your language at all. Then there are mispronunciations because of sound sequencing difficulties. Some sounds are difficult to produce because of where they are in the word, or the word is pretty long. For instance, pronouncing February as February, or animal as aminal. And then some children actually have oral motor planning difficulty. This is having more difficulty with the oral movements for speech. Most children just have normal articulation problems, but some children have what we call childhood apraxia of speech. I have a separate short video on childhood apraxia of speech for those of you who are interested. I'm not including it here because most of your children won't have this difficulty. So we usually take for granted our ability to produce words and sentences automatically. But it is, just as I explained, an incredibly complex sequence of movements. So you need to start the teaching process very early. The more practice a baby gets at imitating sounds and words, the easier it will be for him to speak and to be aware of differences in words. It's well worth the effort to help your baby or toddler practice, practice, practice. And have fun encouraging her to play with sounds and to imitate speech sounds, silly sounds, and funny tongue, lip, face movements. It's all very important preparation for speech. So let's look at some of the things you can do to help your child's articulation. First, speak clearly, sometimes emphasizing some sounds and words to get your toddler used to listening for speech sounds. It's so important that you bring his or her attention to the sounds in speech. And when you tell your toddler the names of objects and people, have him watch your mouth as you pronounce the words so he can imitate your movements. Also, think about how you're making the sounds so you can really show him how to do it. You can teach tongue twisters to your 3-year-old and older, but be patient and start slowly so he'll see it as an enjoyable challenge. Little kids love playing with sounds, so have fun with it. And as I said, go slowly. Also read books with rhymes or funny words like Dr. Seuss or Shel Silverstein books, and have fun focusing on the sounds of language as you read them to your child. Later, your child will learn what a real word is, but you can have fun with this, even if they're not real words. Just play with it. And if your 4-year-old consistently substitutes one sound for another in words like lello instead of yellow, try to figure out what your articulators, your lips and tongue, are doing when you pronounce the sound. And once a day, show your child how to do it. Let him look into a mirror so he can see how he's making the sound. Have a good time with your child as you help them learn to speak really well. Now, please write to me in the comments below. Ask me questions, give me suggestions. Also, please subscribe to my channel and visit my website, thejoyoflanguage.com, and tell your friends, relatives, preschool teachers, babysitters about my book, which explains it all, and of course about my videos. And I'll see you in the next one.